We are live and happy to be here. Let me just start out with just a brief word of welcoming to all of you who are here with us in the Zoom room and to all of you who are out there in Facebook land who may be watching this live stream. And I want to say for those of you who are watching it live stream that immediately after this is over, if you give it about 5 minutes, you can rewatch it on the replay because I can tell you this will be the kind of exciting conversation and you're going to want to watch over and over again. Just as a matter of introduction, I'm Dr. Gloria Willingham. I'm the CEO of African Global Organization and the founder of the Village Projects. And the Village Projects are indeed the sponsors of the Villager Awards. The Villager Awards have been presented now almost 10 years. And I actually see on the screen here Colonel Irma Cooper, who was one of our earlier recipients of a Villager Award. Uh, we were trying to find a way to recognize people, anybody of African ancestry. We call it acknowledged African ancestry, whether they were African American, whether they lived anywhere across the diaspora, whether they were from the continent, and try to find people who had not only found a degree of success in their own lives, in their own world, but who, as a part of that, had become noted for lifting others as they climb. And that's our mantra, lift as we climb. And so you will find that we've given over 100 Villager Awards now over the years. And every single person who has received one has been an exemplar of a person who lifts as they climb, who tries to not only do great things themselves, but who want to really bring others well along with them and let others learn from them. One of the things that we found in our earlier research was that I felt that we were becoming too distant from our own community, that our own community didn't know enough about us, and quite often they missed out on a lot. I felt that we have enough mentors and role models and all kinds of people out here. We just want to make sure that they're seen by a broader audience. And we also wanted to have a way to introduce our award recipients in a very personal way, almost as if they're coming into your home and just talking to you. Now we even do that when we're doing it in a live venue. We try to set everything up as if it's just a good old fashioned homecoming. People are invited to walk around and to talk to each other, introduce themselves to each other, and just really be down to earth with it because we think that that's sort of what we need to have. And so Sarah Davidson, who will be on this call later on, she has another meeting. She will be jumping in here. Sarah was a 2019 Villager Award recipient. And when she comes on, I'll have her tell you something toward the end of this. And so Sarah immediately, she was so thrilled when she was at the Villager Award. She flew all the way from Washington, D.C. To here in Long Beach, California to receive that award. And before she could come off the stage almost, she was telling me about Janis Kearney. I didn't know her. I had heard of her, that's for sure. But it sort of went right past me, but we took the name forward. And then I had finally contacted Janis, and she sent me some information about herself. I was so impressed with everything in the world that she has done. But even more, I was so impressed about how many of the same people we knew and how we knew them. One of the people that we knew was Mr. Trilla Scott, who was featured actually in the book about President Clinton. She had been the lady who had been the babysitter for him when she was a teenager, and he was just a little kid running around. And I remember very well hearing Mrs. Scott talk about Janis Kearney because she had flown to Long Beach, California to interview Mrs. Scott. And Mrs. Scott was just so impressed with her. She was impressed with her on many levels. Number one, Mrs. Scott, like myself, is also from Arkansas. And so the fact that we had somebody else from Arkansas who had come to her house who was interviewing her for a book about the President of the United States, she just was just overjoyed with this. And so then I started to research a little bit more about Janis, and I found out from that she is so much bigger than everything else that we already knew about her. So I know I see some of you there now because she had told me to look for you, that there would be some of her family members that would be joining us. And so I asked her if when she comes on, she'll acknowledge that for us so that we'll know who you are. And she's so excited about you being here. I can tell you that in advance. She's very excited about having family members on this conversation with her. So before I go any further, I want to ask Janice and her husband, who's with her right there by her side, if they would both just come on into the room now so that we can see you. Please. Oh, there you are. I feel like we ought to give you a round of applause. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You guys are looking awfully good there. You're in Little Rock right now, is that right?
We are.
Okay, and how's your weather over there in Little Rock?
Kind of stormy. I think it's supposed to rain tonight.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, but
okay.
it's warm. It's really warm. It's in the 70s.
Oh my goodness, that's really
Yes.
good. You know, Little Rock is my hometown. I tell everybody that.
Yes, I know. I
I'm very,
know.
yes, very proud of Little Rock, and I still have roots there, cousins that are still there, and I don't have any more aunts or uncles. I used to have a whole host of aunts and uncles for sure, but now
Wow.
we're down to cousins. So
Mm,
cousins are like brothers and sisters for us. So that's a very
mm.
close relationship in my family there. So before I go any further, I just want to hear you speak, and Janice, and introduce your husband because I don't want to be overlooking you there, okay?
Okay.
Because I know, because I'm going to come back to you because I got some questions for you too, because I have a feeling you know more than I know, and we want to hear from you as well. So Janice, could you just go ahead, if you will, and introduce your husband? And I know
Sure.
you can see the screen, I'm sure, so you can probably see some of your kinfolk here
I
that are here
can.
as well. So
I
let me just
can.
turn it
And
over to
I'm
you.
happy to see them too. Well, this is my husband, Bob Nash. Bob is actually from Texarkana. If you know anybody from Texarkana, that's where he's from. And we've been married 24 years, and we both were in the White House. When I was there, he was there. And we have lived in Little Rock most of our lives. Both of us have been in Little Rock most of our lives. Bob worked for Governor Clinton for a long time and then went to the White House, but he had already worked for him for about 10 years before then.
Okay.
Um, 20 years, I'm sorry. But you have in your audience, you have my son, Daryl Lennon, my favorite son, uh, happens to be my only son. And I'm really happy that he's here. I'm so proud of him. Maybe you'll tell us a little bit about you, Daryl, a little later on, but I'm a proud mother.
We can let him tell
And
something now if he wants to. Daryl?
want to say something, Daryl?
No, we're really here to celebrate you, to be honest. But I will say I am Deputy General Counsel and Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer at Georgia Tech, which is one of my alma maters. And of all of my family that's on this call and those who are not, including my mother and Bob, they've all been very supportive. So I didn't get here without them.
All right, I love that.
Thank you. And I also have my sisters who are very, very dear to me. Janetta, who lived in California for many, many years. Janetta, you can talk about that. But Janetta has been my mentor and my role model most of my life. And I can't say enough about her. She's had an amazing life journey. So one of these days you need to talk to her. And then my baby sister, Judy, is everybody's baby. Judy was the last one born in the Kearney family. And we all wanted to call her our baby, but Judy now is she's so bright and she's so organized, and we go to her and ask her questions about things now. But she works for, Jeanette is a lawyer, is an attorney, and Judy is a Judy, tell us what you are. I always get it wrong.
I'm a medical social worker at Baptist Medical Center in Little Rock, and I get to ride on all my big brothers and sisters' coattails. So I am blessed to be able to be here to share with you with my sister.
She doesn't have to ride on anybody's
I can tell.
coattails.
I can tell that. Yes.
But I'm just, we're a very close family, so I'm just very excited that they're here with me.
Oh my goodness. This was exciting anyway. It's even more exciting as I'm hearing all of this stuff. This is really something. So let me just ask, let me go to is your first name Bob?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
may I call you Bob?
yes, ma'am. Please do.
Okay, Bob, Now she mentioned you. Let me put you out here first before I dive deep into Janis here. So tell me a little bit about yourself and a little about what you do. And everybody else needs to stay muted now. I'm sorry, I forgot to tell everybody else.
Okay, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. I'm from Texarkana. I grew up on a farm, went to undergraduate school in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and went to graduate school at Howard University in Washington, D.C. I worked for Bill Clinton, when he was Attorney General, Governor, and President. And I guess all together, that's close to 40 years.
Wow.
And I was White House Personnel Director for him, which meant I recruited all the political appointees, secretaries, ambassadors, White House staff, and others. And I enjoyed that. I learned a lot from it. And we put a lot of good people in office. We, in fact, had the most diverse administration in the history of the United States of America.
Yes.
And I was very proud of that. And my other background is banking. And I used to work for the Rockefeller family years ago. And I also worked in banking in Chicago. That's sort of my short background.
Well, that's a loaded background, that's for sure. But now let me give you one more question and then I'm going to go on over. So how did you two meet? I heard you mention that you were both in Washington or at the White House at the time. So tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, we met here in Arkansas. She was involved in politics and publishing, and I was involved in politics and government. We actually met through Bill Clinton, actually. Yeah. Yes. Here in Arkansas.
Okay, so see, I tell everybody Arkansas is a good place to be from.
Yes.
I love my own. All right, well now let me just pivot on over. I'm going to pivot on over to Janis. And Janis, I'm going to tell you where we're going to start, because I read so much about you. I'm trying to find the parts of it that we haven't heard before. That's the part I'm trying to find, and that's going to be hard to find. Only you will know that. That's for sure.
And some of it I'll tell and some I won't. But
I know what you mean. That's all right. I know what you mean. But let's go back to Gould. Let's bring people into the world of Gould, because you told me a little bit about it. Because a lot of people on here are not from Arkansas like we are. So just geographically tell us a little bit about it and a little description of the town if you want to.
Sure. It's a very small town. And I think probably it's about the same size now as it was when we were growing up. Janetta, is that so? Not very much different. And we grew up outside of Gould, even though Gould is the township. We grew up on the outskirts in the country in a place called Varner. And when I talk about Gould, I talk about Varner Road all the time, because that took us from the country into town. So Varner Road is actually the community that we grew up on. And when I think back on that, it was a village. I mean, we knew everybody. The adults were our second parents. We couldn't do anything. If they learned about it, we'd get a whipping at their house, and then we'd go home and we'd get another whipping. It was a very nurturing childhood because of that, because everybody cared about you. Very small, very agriculture. My parents were sharecroppers and they had 19 children, and we all picked and chopped cotton, I think, except Judy and my baby brother, Jeff. We all started chopping and picking cotton when we were maybe 7 years old, and we did it until we left home, which was at 17 or 18 years old. And that was our lives. And, but, I always tell people, if you look at it just from one point, it looks really harsh and dire, but it wasn't all harshness and direness, because we had our parents who were just amazing human beings. And we were just so blessed to have them. And I think the only reason that you're wanting to talk to me, and I have siblings and a child and a husband that I feel so proud of, is because I came from those two people. And they were so wise, and they made sure that we made something of ourselves. So I'm forever grateful to that childhood.
Yes. And I think you bring up a very good point about that, because like I said, I'm from Arkansas too. I was raised in Little Rock, Arkansas, but my father, who was from a little town called Terry, Arkansas.
Oh my goodness, Terry.
Oh yes. Anybody from Terry or Yorktown is related to me.
I think my family lived somewhere close to Terry, right, Janetta? Yes. My dad moved quite a bit early on in their marriage, and Terry, I think, was one of the places
Well,
that they lived.
we probably connected some sort of way. We always,
Mhm,
that's
mhm.
for sure. But Terry's, and it still is, and it's very much like you were describing where you're from. People ask me sometimes, where is Terry? And I said, well, it's down below Pine Bluff.
Right.
That was
That's right.
how we were just taught to describe it, and that's sort of the way it was there. But I want to get back to what you said about quite often. I think when people hear the stories of being raised, like I said, my father insisted that we spend every summer in what we call the country. I
Mhm,
spent every summer with my grandparents, mostly in Holly Grove, Arkansas, and it was very much the way you described it. His thing was
mhm.
that we needed to learn that, and I will be forever grateful for that, because I think it was a very nurturing environment, such as I have never experienced since then. A
Right.
very, very nurturing environment for me,
Mhm.
and I can sense it in you, and I can sense it quite often when I talk to people who have come from similar backgrounds. The stories that you
Mhm.
tell all seem to be pretty aligned, pretty aligned. So
Mhm.
I can feel the culture of it all. So I'm really glad to hear that. So tell me about school. Did you go to school in Gould, and what was that like?
Yes, we went to a segregated school. Most of our especially the elementary and, well, elementary up until seventh grade, we went to a segregated school. And of course, it was subpar. It was not as, the buildings were subpar. The teachers were excellent for us. They were what we needed. And they nurtured us. Just as I said, the village nurtured us. So the teachers, I mean, we may have had some criticisms of one or two, but overall, they prepared us for life. And their whole mission was to make sure that we could succeed in life. Um, and I'm sure some of them were not much older than some of the seniors or juniors, but we couldn't tell the difference because they acted professionally and made sure that we learned. So I have a really good feeling about that. Integration started when I was in ninth grade. Um, there was something called freedom of choice. I don't know whether you've heard of that, but we had freedom of choice during my middle grades.
Mhm.
We left the black school, all black school, and went to the white school. And it was such a culture shock for myself, for sure, and my sister Joanne, who's no longer with us. We were very close and we were in the same grade at the time. So we both found it very hard to navigate. My brothers found it much easier. They were jocks, they were athletic. The school kind of embraced them because they were such good athletes, and they had a different experience. But Joanne and myself, we had kind of a hard time. So there were 2 years of freedom of choice. Then after that, the school went into full integration. But full integration meant that we got all the white teachers, we got all the administration, white administration, and all the white students went to private schools. They created private schools for, I'd say, 90% of the white students. So that was our integration. But I had a great high school experience. I enjoyed my years, my last 4 years in high school. Um, I did a lot of the things that I wanted to do. I enjoyed learning. That's when I really got into reading and books and all of that. So high school was a good experience.
You're very good. And I'm glad to hear that because I haven't heard Gould's story too much. I haven't heard, we hear a lot about Little Rock, but
Mhm.
a lot, and I'm hearing that with a lot of people that we're interviewing now from different places. In fact, one of the things I had said was that even Sarah, I think Sarah Davidson is on the call right now. And one of the things that I had said was that everything was so focused on Little Rock, back in
That's
Little Rock.
right.
And then once we got past that, it's as if the world thought that there was no other place else in Arkansas or no other
Mhm.
place anywhere. And so the
Mhm.
stories that are coming forth now are really, really needed, number one.
Right. Right. As a matter of fact, even in Little Rock, there were schools going through some of the same things,
yes, yes.
students going through the same things, but all of the focus was on the Little Rock Nine.
Yeah, it truly was. And I know, as I told you, I went to Central High School immediately following the Little Rock Nine, and I was telling somebody it took me 30 years before I could really tell my story, because I always felt that my story was going to be counter narrative. It really was. It was not what everybody else was saying. There were some things that I knew. I've been there for 3 straight years, and I didn't tell it. And there are a lot. I'm not the only one. I have actually talked to two of the other Black students that went to school, started with me when I went in my cohort of 4, uh, who absolutely refused to talk about it. Just refused, because they feel that nobody's going to listen to me anyway. I'm going to believe what I have to say. And it took a while to get over this. So I am so happy to hear you, sharing your story. And I see Janis sort of nodding over there too. And I'm Janis, I'm sorry. But I think that this is so important. So I thank you for that. I thank you for that. So then the question that we had related to that, and I'm going to ask you this question, because people asked me this question a lot, and it had to do with, because I went to the segregated school too, up until a very good school, by the way, Dunbar Junior High School, up until I got to the 9th grade, and then was selected to. We didn't have choice at that point. Selected to go to Central High School. That was before we got into that. But one of the things I tell everybody that I noticed, and I don't know if that was your experience or not, I was very happy at Dunbar Junior High School, very popular, very happy, loved my teacher, loved my classmates, loved everything about it. And I really thought that when I was going to Central, that the only thing different was going to be, this is in my child head, was going to be that I would be going to school with whites instead of Black. That's what I thought. I had no idea about anything else that was going to be different about it. So aside from all the negative things that I've talked about a lot, but one of the things that it did do was that I learned the differences in the resources. I was just aghast at the resources that we had when I was at Little Rock Central High School, because I hadn't seen anything like that before. And, when we'd go to the chem lab or the physics lab or the books, or even in the language labs, we had language labs that are unbelievable. And I thought, oh my goodness, all of this exists in the world, brand new textbooks every time. I just had no idea that those kinds of resources existed. And I'm wondering, did you have that experience? Was that something close to you?
Absolutely, absolutely. Not that Gould it wasn't that rich or wealthy or anything, but there was definitely a stark difference between Fields High School, elementary school, middle school, and Gould, the white school. Because we would get their books every year and we would see their names in the books. And when I went to the school, then I would meet some of the people whose names I'd seen in our books at the end of the year. So it was completely different. They didn't have like holes in the walls. It didn't rain in the classrooms. They had sports. We didn't have sports at the Black school. We had, I think, basketball. For sure we had basketball, but that was the only sport. They had football. I think they even had some kind of soccer or something like that. So they had a lot more resources and they did a lot more things than we were able to do.
And I found at Central, with Horace Mann, which was the all-Black high school there in Little Rock, I have to say that it was a new school by then, and they did have a lot more resources once they built that new school, and they had wonderful sports team and bands and all of that. At Central, though, unlike what you were describing at Gould, we were not allowed to participate. Those of us in those first 2 or 3 groups in any sports whatsoever, no extracurricular activities whatsoever, nothing. All we were allowed to do was to go to class. There was nothing else that we were allowed to do. I don't think people realize that. And we had some people, all of us came from very popular backgrounds. I mean, we had athletes, we had people who were honor society people and newspaper editors and all the things you were allowed to do then, so I had no idea that would be taken away. No idea whatsoever that I was going to lose that for that reason, but it did. So let me move you, since I'm on this trail of thought here, let me just move you on, because one of the things I did learn in talking to you we were talking about, I found out people that we knew in common. But Miss Daisy Bates, who I always tell everybody I would love forever, because I don't think I would have ever made it without her. And all of us would say that. But tell us about Mrs. Bates and how you met her. Tell a little bit about that.
Well, I didn't know her at the point that you knew her. I met her when I was 16 years old. And I met her when she had moved to Mitchellville.
Yes.
She moved to Mitchellville in the 70s, I think. No, it was 60s. It was,
It was late 60s, I think.
Yes, it was during the Johnson era. And she was over this Office of Economic Opportunity. She had opened up that office down there. Mitchellville was a very poor town. I don't think it was even an incorporated city then, but she made a lot of difference in that city. So my dad somehow found out that she needed a summer worker that summer of 69, that's when it was. And he said, do you want to try to get a job with her? Which I thought was the weirdest thing in the world, because we chopped cotton every summer. I could not believe my dad was actually asking me that, but I said yes, because I was interested in writing and she was a journalist, so I said yes. So he took me down there, drove me down in his truck, and I got down there. I was very nervous because I'd never applied for anything before. So I got out and I just knew my dad was going to get out and go in with me. He sat there reading his newspaper. He said, I'll see you when you get back. So I went in, knocked on the door, and here is Daisy Bates standing at the door. And I was just as nervous as I could be. And she just smiling and asked me, what do you want? And I told her my dad had told me about this job. And she said, okay, come on in. So I went in, looked around, she had this big picture. I'll never forget this big picture of her husband that she had, of LC, just kind of sitting in the living area, in the front area. And she said, that's my husband, that's LC. And I don't remember her saying much more, but then she gave me this test, this typing test. She had this little typewriter, and she gave me a dictionary, and she said, just type until you type about 5 minutes. So I'm just typing and nervous. And then she comes back and she looks at it and she says, why don't you go back and take typing again? And then you can come back and see me next summer. So I did not get that job. I was so crestfallen. So I went back out, almost crying. My dad said, well, I said, well, I didn't get the job, Dad. He said, oh, okay. He didn't say much of anything. He said, let's go. Let's go. So we went back, and she made such an impression on me, just those few minutes that I was with her. And I told people, I didn't realize she was so small, because I felt like this woman was huge, but she was a really small woman. And I didn't see her until 20 years later. In 1984, after her husband had died, she opened a newspaper. And I was working for state government at the time. So I didn't, I knew she was working. She was there, but I didn't just to go by and see her or anything. But in 1987, a friend of mine told me she needed a managing editor. And I said, well, I felt like it was kind of time for me to do something else. And I really felt like I was kind of putting my writing on the back burner. So I figured this is a way that I could get back into my writing. And I went over, and she took it. And then I went back to my office and I got a phone call. So I went back and she interviewed me, and I reminded her, I said, Miss Bates, you haven't seen me for a long time. And when you saw me, I could not type, but I can type now. And you didn't give me that other job, but I sure hope you give me this one. And she hired me. She hired me as her managing editor. And I was there for about 3 months, and she decided she was going to retire. And she did. She retired. She was going to sell the newspaper. And I went back to my house and talked to my husband, Daryl's father, who I was married to at the time. And we talked, and and decided that I was going to go back and ask her, to sell it to me. And I did. I went back and asked her, and she did. She thought about it, but she said, "Okay, I'm going to do it. I think you have the fire in the belly that this needs, and I'm going to sell this to you." So I took over the newspaper in 1988, and she stayed on for a couple of years as, kind of an advisor to help. And after that, I was there for another 3 or 4 years. And I left in 1993, and Janetta was good enough to take over as the publisher at that point. But Daisy Bates was something else. And I always tell people that she is one of my sheroes. Her life is just amazing. What she did with her life without a real education, and from her background, most people don't know that she was basically an orphan, that her mother was raped and killed and thrown in a bow, and that her father ran away and left her, and she stayed with friends of the father, but they never adopted her. They kept her, but they didn't adopt her. So she had a hard time, and she was very bitter as a child when she learned what had happened. How her mother had died, and she ran into racism very early. So she was a very strong woman. But I always say that her husband, L.C. Bates, they were made for each other. I mean, there's a lot of questions about how they got together and all that, but in the end, I really believe they were good for each other.
Tell about the book you wrote about Daisy, Janis.
Yeah, I wrote a book about her. After she died, I did begin working on a biography of Daisy Bates. So that came out in 2013.
Yes, I even have a copy of it. I was looking because I had meant to have it here to hold it up when you said that.
Yeah, she's an amazing human being. She really is somebody that I have long admired.
Yes, yes, yes. I read your book, and then I've also, heard some things about her, even since then.
Mm-hmm.
And when I knew her, go ahead.
Let me tell you this, that there's going to be a statue of her. The state decided that there would be a statue of her and Johnny Cash. They're replacing 2 old statues, and she's going to be one of them that they're going to put in the Capitol.
Oh, so
The U.S. Capitol, not the state Capitol.
Goodness, that is so wonderful to hear. That is really wonderful to hear. When I first met Mrs. Bates, I met her. My brother and I. Our first job was throwing papers, and it was a state press. We'd go after school and pick up our little state press, and we had our little route that we would throw the papers, and it was fun. That was like our first real job, really. We were so happy to get that job. We didn't know what to do. But little did I know that while we were throwing papers and picking up our papers, you never know when people are watching you. I tell young people that all the time. You don't know what people see in you or what they're doing. But apparently she was, because when they started looking for the next group to go into Little Rock Central High School, and I was one of the people that ended up being recruited. And I never knew, you were talking about how small she was. As a child, she was bigger than life to me. And I didn't realize she was a beautiful woman. I didn't know that. To me, she was like she was an old lady. She had to have been very young at the time. But as a child, you don't see that.
Right.
I just saw this woman who was just had a spirit that I loved, and I thought it was wonderful. And I knew I could go. I cried on her shoulders many a day, because we had to have somewhere to go to cry. And we just had to have it. And she was that person. And all of us tell the stories about how we had respite, called it, where we went. Some went to AM and N. That's where you had to go because you didn't have a social life otherwise.
Right.
And I was sent over to Philander Smith College to work over there within one of their youth groups while I was at Central High School, which really gave me a social life that I otherwise would never have had. She always knew that. She sort of knew what we needed. And she knew. You could just crown her shoulder, and she knew. And she arranged my first little job. I worked while I was at Central, sweeping up hair at the beauty shop for one of her friends.
Wow.
So I have lots of little stories about her. And when you said that, I just feel connected right away. Because anybody who's connected with her, I just feel connected, because to me, she was just an angel above all angels. I don't think I could have made it. And I think if you talk to anybody else who went to Central during those early days, emotionally, I think they probably would say the
Right.
same thing.
Yes.
Emotionally, I just don't think we could have.
Absolutely.
So
DK, my son probably has some stories about those years. He was just a teenager during those years when I had to stay up there. It's hard work. Newspaper work,
yeah.
Janetta knows, it is hard work. And sometimes I was up there until very early in the morning and had to get up and come back, you know, in a few hours. But that's what you had to do.
Yes, yes. Well, I'm glad you did it. I'm glad the paper went to you and it kept going, because that in itself is iconic.
Mm-hmm.
Press is iconic. It really is. And the history of that's another whole story in itself. My goodness. So we moved you on up a little bit here. Let me see. I see Sarah Davidson is on the line here now. Sarah, can you or did you leave us? Well, she was on the line. Now I don't see her anymore. So she may have had to drop out there for a minute. But let me see. One of the things, family members, let me tell you all something. One of the things that we call these interviews, we have what we call witnesses to your life. That's what you are. That's what we call. These are people who are the witnesses to the lives of the people that we're interviewing. Okay. So as witnesses to her life, we like to ask you for any one specific little incident that you can remember that just brought you to joy about her. And I'm going to let you decide who's going to go first. I'll give you 1 second to make that decision, and then just unmute yourself. Whoever wants to speak, just one good thing.
Daryl, I'm putting you on the spot.
You just unmute yourself there, Daryl. There you go.
So one instance about my mom.
Yes.
It's hard to count. I mean, she really is an example for all people at all times. I mean, I thought that when I was young. I still think that as an adult with my own children. What I can say is something that's continuous through all of that. And I think is part of what my mother and my aunts have said about my grandparents and their parents. There's a certain type of support and love you can get from a mother. And it's special for moms, and dads have a different type. But the type that I got from my mom that I almost feel was just a translation from my grandparents is it is hard for me to even do, to make a child believe in the impossible. That they can achieve whatever they feel like they want to, and to send you out in this world that pretty much is built to tell you all day, every day that you can't do anything. And I don't remember one day ever walking outside and believing the world over what my mother had said. And so if you can, get that kid to believe that, what the world is out here to tell you no, and I'm here to tell you yes, and you know who you should listen to. I mean, I think that's the greatest gift in the world. And so I still live by that to this day. And I've had some rough days, but I've had a lot of good days. And part of that has been because I was properly trained. And I owe that all to her.
Thank you, DK.
All right.
Okay. Let me not cry.
Judy, because everybody does.
Again, going back to being the youngest, obviously my parents were wonderful, but I had a lot of parents when you think about it, from a family of 19. So Janis definitely has been a shining light for me and a mentor, and helped me to make it through some of the more difficult times, particularly after my real mother did die early in my life. She was the person that I went to, and she was always so nurturing and supportive and encouraging. And even to this day, she remains the same person. What you see is genuine.
Thank you, Judy.
Beautiful. Janetta.
Our baby.
Well, I think our baby has said it all, but if I think of one thing that I was so impressed for, because it's so like mom, and yet Janis and I, even with our age difference, I considered friends and comrades and whatever. we did, except with her taking care of mom and dad during their illness. That was to me so extraordinary, such a feat, so far beyond my comprehension until I'm not a crier, but I was always crying about the fact that she would leave her office at the paper and go to see mom who had cancer in the middle of the night to try to get back to, and I'm running around having fun and doing whatever I do, and knowing that Janis is having fun, but yet all of this work she's doing, whether she considered it work or not, it was something that had to be done, and she just did it. That is beyond how I think. And it is so necessary. And I've only seen one other person who has that kind of selflessness, and that's mom. That's Janis's mom. So whenever I see her, whether I'm in a meeting or whatever I'm doing, I'm always looking at it and even saying out loud, girl, you're looking or acting or saying or talking or doing like mom. And people are looking at me like, you're antique still talking about your mom. But Janis presents so much like mom until I bring it up from time to time, even in the midst of other colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a huge compliment. But let me say that Judy deserves much of the credit for dad, because I was away for much of those older years as he was getting older, and Judy came home and she was the caretaker. And I was so grateful for that, Judy.
Judy did do that. You
Yes.
were there for mom, though, running
Yes.
back and forth up and down the highway. That Daryl recalls, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. All in love.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You want me to say?
I want Bob to say something.
Okay, Bob.
Okay. First of all, let me just say this. Janis's family probably was the poorest family in the county, the whole county.
Bob, can you scoot over a little bit so we can look closer
I
to her so we can see?
I think they were the poorest family in the county, but they also, I think, were the hardest working and smartest family. And the reason I say that is because, and I'm speaking about Janis and all of her siblings, because they all fit this category. They were hardworking, they were smart. They had to stay out of school for a month sometimes during the beginning of the crop season because they couldn't go to school when the crops were in. But when they went to school, many of them finished at the top of their class. And many of them, Janis and others, got scholarships to go to school, which is why you have 18 college graduates, 9 lawyers, and from Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Vanderbilt, and University of Arkansas. And their kids are also doing well. Janis's son is an attorney and an engineer, and other kids, his other cousins are doctors and lawyers and others. And Janis fits that category, but she's unselfish. Celebrate Maya, this nonprofit that she works, she doesn't take a salary. She raises money to run this program for young kids, but doesn't take a salary at all. Just operates out of the goodness of her heart. That's the reason I love her so much. She cares so much about people, just like her other siblings. And with that many siblings, you usually would find somebody you don't like, right? And I like all these people. It's unusual. They're all very fine people, and I get along with every one of them.
He especially liked my dad.
Oh yeah, I love his dad. Her dad was just, we were looking at him last night on television, on a documentary that they did about him. We were looking at it. But anyway, that's my comment about Janis and her family.
Now, do you see why we always, audience out there in Facebook land particularly, this is why we always like to have some family members whenever we can, because we do call our families our witnesses to our lives.
Yes.
We can say certain things about ourselves. The media can say certain things. The people can say certain things. But when you hear it coming from the family, at that point, you're really That's a whole
Yes.
different situation. It
Yeah.
touches your heart. Janice, how did all that make you feel as you were listening to this?
Really, really wonderful.
Thank you.
I never think about any of the things that any of them said, but to hear them say it makes me feel really good. And if I'm doing something right, I just want to continue doing it.
Well, obviously you are, and it sounds like, and I heard it talked about how large the family was. I have a family of cousins, the Fosters. Fosters, if you're watching, you know I'm going to talk about you. I always talk about them. And it may have been 19 of them. It was a lot of them though. And it was just me and my brother at home. But we love visiting the Fosters. I love it to this very day. Because there was a special camaraderie about that big family. There's something very different about that. So I resonate with everything that you said, Bob, and I applaud you also for recognizing that in your wife. I think that's just really amazing. That's just really, that's great. That's great. That's great. All right. I know Sarah is here. I didn't want to quit without having her say something because she nominated you. She's trying to get her camera and everything fixed up there. I can see her doing it.
I see you, Sarah.
Are you together?
Hi. Yeah, actually, how you all doing?
We doing
Hey,
pretty
Sarah.
good.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I had to laugh on some of the things you said. It was kind of amusing, you know. Actually, I apologize, but I'm working on a last minute project someone gave me 2 days ago.
Oh, wow.
For something that's due in the District of Columbia, and in my church, they keep calling me about something. I keep telling them I call them back. So it's kind of a hectic schedule tonight. And so it's not like this every night, but it's just kind of hectic. But you know, I'm just really.
Sarah, let me interrupt you just a little bit because we don't have a lot of time. But let me tell you something. What I really want you to do, because I've had the family sort of do their witnessing to her life. But you were the one who told me that Janis is definitely the person for this award. So I want you to tell us what you saw in Janis that made you just know that.
Okay, what I saw in Janis after I got to know her was the fact that she was a person that walked against the tide, and the tide would knock her down. She had circumstances that said she should not be successful. She should not achieve in America. You cannot come from poverty and be successful. You cannot come when someone is standing on your bootstraps to be successful. And she and her family overcame all of that. So to me, my undergraduate degree is sociology. That to me said a lot. I've often told her that whatever your parents did, you should put it in, see if you could put it in some kind of formula or something so that people could drink it so that they, because I really felt that her family is an example that defies the odds of what textbooks say a family should be able to accomplish based on their walk in life. I mean, it really defies the odds, coming from a family of 19 in a very impoverished situation, according to society, they should have been criminals and robbing banks and all of that. And what are they? They're newspaper publishers, they are judges, they are political appointees, and head of this and that, So to me, I don't think her family's gotten enough publicity in America in terms of what they've done and who they are. I mean, they are, to me, are a Hollywood textbook story.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much for nominating me. I appreciate that. And you've been a good friend ever since we met in DC. Been a wonderful friend.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for chiming in. Thank you, Janis. Thank you, Bob, for being there by her side. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to just have a conversation with you.
Yes.
I really, really do appreciate this more than you know. When we get these videos, when it's done, we'll get a copy of it to you, of course. But we also like to get copies to schools. We talk about education. And my grandfather used to say, never turn down free education, girl. And he used to say, so when you have an opportunity to learn, because the lessons learned just in listening to this, just in listening to this conversation right now, will touch somebody more than you know.
Mhm.
I mean, it's touching, you know. There are people, as my mother used to say, just waiting to hear this kind of message, waiting to learn, waiting to see. And so I really appreciate all of you. I applaud all of you, that's for sure. Uh, and I'm just happy that you were here. So two things I want to say that we will be getting the award to you. We were sort of debating about the awards because it just didn't seem right. Just mail it to people. I said, okay, so what do we do? Do we mail it to them? We pray and wait. So, okay, next year when they come, we can have a double presentation. We're still working on that one, but we're going to get it to you for sure. But I want you to have the closing word. And I want you to, whatever you would just like to say to our audience out here that you would like to leave with them, anything inspirational that you want to leave with them, and then we will be ready to close right on time.
Well, Dr. Willingham, first of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you for the recognition. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I'm so excited that you asked me to invite my family members, because that means you don't know how much that means to me to have my family with me here. I guess what I'm going to leave with you, it's kind of piggybacking off what my son said about our parents. I always think of children and what we're doing to prepare them for the world. And I just think everybody on here tonight has something, some gift that they can share, they can give one way or another. And I just ask people to find it in themselves to give and to impact some child or many children if you can, one way or another, because they are our future. They absolutely are, good or bad. They are going to be our leaders. They are the people who we are going to have to look to, or will be gone, but somebody's going to have to look to. And it's our responsibility. I believe it's our responsibility. And I just think that is a responsibility that all of us should take very seriously.